Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon video. So today I'm going to be talking about the new Japanese ban and restricted list. So I made a community post about the image and their explanation, and this is just kind of my general thoughts and rundown on the ban itself. So the card didn't actually get banned as of September 1st. All of these cards for Japan are going to be limited to one. We already knew about JetSilphymon and Tommy because, well, the English version already got those early, and the only new addition to this list is going to be DoruGreymon from BT7. So DoruGreymon is to nerf the Alphamon deck more specifically, and this card is just a very powerful card based on how Alphamon and X antibodies in black want to play in general. So as far as the explanation that they gave for limiting the card down to one, well, it's because the Digimon is a card with X antibody in its traits, so it has lots of different searchability and usability with all of the different ways that black plays X antibodies. Like, as an example, it can easily be used as a Digimon to throw in the evolution source of other cards, utilizing the effect of Yuji to be able to add inheritable sources on top of other cards that just want to add inheritable sources themselves, like the rare Alphamon from BT9. So it's just a good card to be able to shove underneath the inheritable source to increase the overall damage output of the deck, just because the security attack +1 ability is able to be stacked. So the more of that card you have in your inheritable sources, the easier and higher the damage output the deck can do, and that's part of the reason why it's getting hit, is because of the overall damage output and the fact that it does stack. On top of all of that already, it also has another ability when you digivolve up into it that's a very strong defensive effect that doesn't disappear until the end of the opponent's next turn, so it really starts to limit and reduce the amount of interaction that the opponent has with this card, on top of the fact that it also has the built-in immunity to not have its DP be able to reduce, on top of unable to be deleted by card effects. So you couple all of those different protections in, on top of the fact that it has security attack +1, on top of the fact that it's an X antibody Digimon, and it's very easy to see why the card is just so good in the way Alphamon wants to play to be able to OTK the opponent. But the thing is that a lot of people are not necessarily liking about this ban and restriction list is the fact that, well, they kind of wanted more to be banned and restricted. Just hitting this one card isn't necessarily good enough in the vast majority of eyes of the people, because they just don't seem very happy with the fact that Xros Hearts didn't even get touched at all, and the ban and limitation on this card reduces the overall playability on Alphamon. It's not a dead deck by any stretch of the word. There's still some replacements, which I'll get into in just a moment, but it does harm the deck by quite a lot by taking away a lot of its built-in protection and OTK combo potential to be able to burst out a lot of really strong attacks to close out the game with. So without the inclusion of this deck, it only makes a deck like Xros Hearts even stronger, which is why people were really hoping to at least see Sunrise Buster get hit, just because this is one of the best control tools in a deck like Xros Hearts. So if you're unfamiliar with what Xros Hearts is going to be doing in BT10, which you could look at all of the spoiler videos that I made if you're really interested, or just go to a database and look up those cards, but essentially the core concept of the Xros Hearts deck is another tamer-based deck. So you're literally just going to be playing your tamers are going to be doing a whole bunch of different abilities, and your Digimon are going to have the ability to be tucked underneath your tamer to be able to have them be reused for material for the Digicross ability, allowing you to have some very cheap and effective Digimon to be able to be played, while them also being really strong, just because you're reducing their cost because of the Digicross ability. So a card like Sunrise Buster just naturally goes into that because it's helping you play your tamers for being on theme and on color with what the deck is trying to do, acting as a really powerful control backbone for the deck outside of you splashing in your own Dexmon, which people were also theorizing and Dexmon would get hit, but because Dexmon is a higher rarity card, it had a less likelihood of actually getting any sort of limitation. So as far as the limitation that we didn't get that people were expecting was because Xros Hearts now has one less deck to go up against in terms of actually being a threat to the Xros Hearts deck, and now it just makes Xros Hearts even better as a result. and a lot of people are speculating that this is purely because of greed and sales, and that's not necessarily the case. They might end up hitting Xros Hearts later, but they just don't necessarily want to hit Xros Hearts now because they want to see what these changes are going to do to the overall metagame, even though we kind of already have an idea that Xros Hearts is just going to end up taking over, because already in Japan it already has such a large play rate and a large win rate already. So people are just fearing that the game is just going to turn into Xros Hearts until something is done, and unfortunately Xros Hearts is getting even more support in BT11, as we see with some of the new spoilers that are coming out for BT11. So it just left a very sour taste in people's mouths at the fact that only Alphamon got hit and not Xros Hearts, when they could have easily just hit Sunrise Buster, and that would have at least took Xros Hearts down a tiny peg. It's not actually harming the deck that much, it's just removing one of its best control tools that's also gaining value in resources. But as far as what they could have banned instead was something like Cool Boy to just try to slow down the use of all of these different OTK-based decks, just because it's acting as one of the key consistency tools to all of those X-Antibody decks, which the vast majority of the X-Antibody decks are very high damage decks that also have the potential to be able to OTK the opponent. So hitting Cool Boy would have made all of those decks less consistent, which wouldn't necessarily kill the decks outright. It would force them to shift their game plan and forces the decks to do various different things to try to make up for that loss in consistency. And speed in OTK-based decks is a huge problem, because the faster you could find all of your parts and pieces, the faster you could combo off and kill the opponent with, which makes those games not very fun or interactive as well, which is why a lot of people were speculating why Cool Boy would get hit. So the fact that Cool Boy didn't get hit and DoruGreymon got hit also means that it affects the Dex DoruGreymon as far as the black base butt goes, just because now it makes Dex DoruGreymon a less usable card as a result, and make the Dex deck less viable as a result as well. But as far as what Alphamon can do to try to make up for the fact that DoruGreymon is going to be limited is we do have two alternative level 5s to try to use. So we could try to use Gradimon, or we could try to use Hisarumon. They both have their own benefits, and they both could go into this deck, but it's, again, not necessarily going to be to the same strength that it was, and these are just the replacements that we could think about using, and we do have to shift the deck to incorporate these replacements a little bit better. So the deck is going to change, it's not going to be as strong, and people are only really upset just because they wanted more cards hit to try to at least limit Xros Hearts and Blue Flares, just because those are decks that are going to be very, very powerful coming in BT10, and we know that they're going to be staying around because of how strong they are, because of that core strategy that we saw with hybrids, where just playing Tamers and having the opponent be unable to respond or interact with those Tamers is very good, because you could use those Tamers to not only rack up value, but to use them to do various different things with. And looking at the bigger picture in terms of all of the cards that they limited/banned, well, the majority of them, even though they've stated because the deck's overstayed its welcome, I think reading in between the lines, it's not necessarily because the deck's overstayed its welcome, it's just the deck is kind of cannibalizing the color to a degree that they don't necessarily agree with. So we saw that with Savior Huckmon, where that was their reasoning, but Savior Huckmon was just the best red deck at the time, and there was no reason to play any other red deck but Savior Huckmon, even future red decks as well, just because, well, it's basically doing what the format kind of wants to do, at least in terms of BT9 already, where it already had the OTK potential, and it just was a really powerful and oppressive deck, on top of the fact that they probably also knew that it was getting support in the future, which only made their justification for limiting the card even stronger. So that was one of the core reasons why they decided to limit a card like Savior Huckmon. Argamon was kind of just a design mistake, and JetSilphymon was kind of similar to Savior Huckmon, where there's no reason never to not play the yellow hybrid package inside of whatever yellow deck you're playing, and you're just going to be swapping out the top end to just use the best yellow mega that you have, just because of the speed of evolution and the recovery factor was just super good on JetSilphymon. And DoruGreymon kind of is fitting in that same line of thought, so it was just a very easy card to want to limit, just because, again, it was also a very powerful card inside of the deck that it was being played in, reducing the amount of interaction the game has as a whole, and that's that's kind of been their whole core and theme, is just what cards are not going to be fun to be playing against, and what cards are problematic for future design space. That's kind of why Mega Digimon Fusion got banned, was because it was limiting design space. Similar reason why Hidden Potential Discovered got limited was, again, limiting design space, and Ice Ball and Tommy were just not fun cards to play up against, along with reinforcing memory boost. Then Aizman is the only not level 5 Digimon on this list, and that's because, again, he's just having so much extra value that there's no reason never to not play him ever in any purple deck, period, because you just discard him, and then you just get free value and free bodies on the field that you then can use to Digivolve all the way up, or even DNA Digivolve to be able to get some extra aggression out of nowhere, and that's kind of the reason why they decided to limit those cards. So again, it's not 110% based solely on greed. There is actual some design merits to wanting these cards get limited. But as far as my overall thoughts on the current news on these new ban and restricted announcements, I do kind of agree with their justification on wanting these cards limited, but I also think that they could have done more to be able to limit Xros Hearts, especially looking at some Japanese data after doing some mild research. Knowing that Xros Hearts is going to be the Boogeyman deck next set, they could have easily just hit a card like Sunrise Buster that's inside of the deck, that's helping the deck without actually killing the deck outright, especially since we know that BT11 is going to be giving Xros Hearts even more support. Now would have been the perfect time to want to limit and hit cards centered around that deck, and that deck is going to be using, so that way the new support cards have a little bit more room to breathe, and the deck isn't necessarily as powerful with those support cards, so it is slightly taking it down a peg, which is what usually a ban and restricted announcement is supposed to do, is try to balance things out a little bit, and I feel like this isn't necessarily adding a lot of extra balance. We currently don't know when this DoruGreymon restriction is going to be taking place for the English format, but for the Japanese format, it's going to be on September 1st. And as far as my little message to the community, if you made it this far into the video, is that you're justified for your feelings of anger and frustration because of that unmet expectation that they were going to use this opportunity to try to fix it and balance some of the meta, just because Xros Hearts right now is running rampant in Japan, and we don't necessarily want to face that in the English side, and Japan doesn't want to continue to face Xros Hearts in the future the way they currently are. But I do want to give credit where credit is due, and I like the fact that they are trying to take a little bit more of an active role in balancing their game with more frequent ban and restricted announcements, and hopefully they're going to be using more ban and restricted announcements to try to help balance out the metas for problematic cards that are staying around a little bit too long, not necessarily making the game a very fun or enjoyable experience. So hopefully in the future, we'll see if they're going to be having another ban and restricted announcement, if anything is going to be done about Xros Hearts. But I'm still curious on when the English format is going to get this ban and restricted announcement, because that will have a huge impact on our meta, and we all thought that with JetSilphymon and Tommy gone, that BT9 was going to be this dread of a format, and it's turning out to be a little bit more enjoyable than we originally thought, and who knows, maybe this is going to be a very similar thing to that, where BT10 and Post isn't going to be as bad as it seems, just because of how the English format plays differently than Japanese format. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.